Naleo, miyan kekansan, miwile pana e sona pi Toki Pona. Hey everyone, I'm Greg Dan3, and I'm going to teach you about Toki Pona. Today, we're going to talk about prepositions, a way to add context to any sentence you say. And we're going to start with looking at all the new content words for this lesson, and then the prepositions. Here, we have ilo. That's spelled I-L-O. Ilo is drawn with this hammer-like shape, a vertical line all the way through its top, and then two square sides of it. And it has to do with all kinds of tools. You could think of a hammer or a wrench just as well as a vehicle or heavy machinery as tools, as ilo. Next, we have tenpo. T-E-N-P-O. Tenpo is drawn with this clock shape, a circle with the two hands of a clock on the inside. And it has to do with time in all of its forms. You can use it to talk about a small amount of time, a large amount of time, a large number of times that a thing happens, and a bunch of other things in between. Next, we have sewi. S-E-W-I. Sewi is drawn with this W-like shape and then a vertical line at the far right-hand side. And it has to do with things being up or above. Next, we have the word anpa. A-N-P-A. Anpa is drawn with this half box shape and then a dot right below it. And you could think of anpa as the counterpart to sewi. It has to do with things that are below or underneath. Next, we have ma. That's M-A. It's drawn with this circular shape with a plus down the center, one vertical and one horizontal line. And ma has to do with the ground, gravel, or dirt. And it has to do with the idea of locations, such as countries, cities, towns. Next, we have nasin. N-A-S-I-N. Nasin is drawn with a vertical line with a upward-facing arrow going through its center. And nasin has to do with methods or ways. You could say both physical and metaphorical paths. And what I mean by that is, you could say a road is a nasin, or a sidewalk, or train tracks. And you could also say that a political ideology or a set of religious beliefs are nasin. Again, physical and metaphorical paths. Next, we have supa. That's S-U-P-A. Supa is drawn with a horizontal line and then two small, almost vertical lines angled out. It looks like a table, and that's exactly the idea it's getting at. Supa has to do with furniture or large flat items like floors. It especially has to do with man-made large flat things, which is why furniture is such a large portion of its semantic space. You could say a bed is a supa just as well as a table or a dinner plate. And then the last primary content word we have is poka. P-O-K-A. Poka is drawn again with this half box symbol, but the dot is now on the right-hand side of it instead of underneath. And this kind of gets at what it means. Where anpa meant below or underneath, poka means beside, as you can understand from the picture. You can imagine it being all kinds of beside as well, not just in physical location where you're standing next to somebody, but also times that are in the near future or the near past. Next, we have the prepositions themselves. So for starters, we have tawa. T-A-W-A. Tawa is drawn with a pair of legs facing toward the right and has to do with motion. As a preposition, it has to do with several different ideas, most importantly to going to a specific location. We'll get into more what that means very soon. Next, we have the preposition lon. L-O-N. Lon is drawn with a horizontal line across the bottom and then a dot directly over it in the center. Ron has to do with truth and existence, and as a preposition, it talks about the location where things are. Next, we have tan. T-A-N. Tan is drawn with a small semicircular arrow, with the arrowhead on the left side. Tan is a preposition about cause or origin, and the arrow reflects that. Whatever is on the starting side of the arrow is the cause of whatever is on the arrowhead side, the ending side of the arrow. It points to the thing it causes. Next we have sama, S-A-M-A. Sama is drawn with two horizontal lines in the shape of an equal sign, and it has to do with similarity. Things can be a little bit similar or completely identical. Sama can talk about both of these and everything in between. And finally, we have kepiken. K-E-P-E-K-E-N. Kepiken. Kepiken is drawn with the symbol for hand similarly to pali or moku or even pana. But the top half of it is now the symbol for ilo, with a little bit of the handle shown right there between the hand and the tool. Kepiken has to do with the idea of usage. So you could say you use something else. Now, important note, out of all of these prepositions, kepiken in particular is unique. It is exclusively a preposition. You could hear statements such as me kepiken, I use or I am using, and whatever you're using can be implied. But other than that, kepiken is used almost exclusively as a preposition, whereas all the other words will be used as normal content words in every other part of a sentence. Let's talk about where you can find a preposition in a sentence. A preposition may appear after the object. We could say, suno, li, walo, e, kiwen, which on its own is the body of the sentence and something we already can understand. But then we can add on tawa, lukin. So what does that do to the sentence? Well, suno li walo e kiwen is something like, the sun turns this rock white. The phrase on the end, tawa lukin, has to do with perspective. We'll get more into what that means soon. But you could say that this qualifier, this context, tawa lukin, means that suno li walo e kiwen is not literally physically happening. Instead, it's only in the perspective of eyes. In other words, the rock looks white to your eyes. Let's look at another one. Kasi, li, kama, wawa, tan, telo, pona. Kasi, li, kama, wawa, tan, telo, pona. Here, the preposition appears after the predicate. In fact, let's go back and mark both of these. We have an underline for tawa lukin here, and then another one for tan, telo, pona here. So the preposition can go after the predicate as well. In this case, of course, there is no object, so understandable. Kasi le kama wawa is the core of our sentence, and that's something like the plant becomes powerful or strong. Tan talks about a cause or origin, right? So if we say kasi le kama wawa tan, we're about to provide a reason, an explanation for how the kasi became wawa. Tan telo pona. Kasi li kama wawa tan telo pona. That is, the plant became strong because of good water. And then one more example of where a preposition can be in a sentence. Ona, li, sama, mi, mute. Ona, li, sama, mi, mute. Here we recognize our preposition again. Sama starts the preposition, and then mi, mute is the prepositional phrase. Now, in this case, the prepositional phrase and the whole of the preposition is the predicate. It starts right there at the predicate. So interpretation-wise, what does this mean? Well, sama has to do with similarity. And then we say the subject, we're saying it is similar to the prepositional phrase, which is mi mute. So they are similar to us. So what we learn here is that prepositions always appear last. Now, we'll get to a piece of grammar that lets us do otherwise in the future, but for now, prepositions will always appear at the end of their respective statement. So let's go on into detail about each preposition. So first we have the preposition tawa. We could say, mi tawa telo suli. This is the first aspect of the preposition tawa. Tawa has to do with motion, in this case, traveling to specific locations. So let's highlight our prepositional phrase right here, mi tawa telo suli. That is, I go to the big water, such as a lake or an ocean. We could also say, ona li pana e sona tawa yan ante. Ona li pana e sona tawa yan ante. And so our prepositional phrase is right here, tawa yan ante, and the core of the sentence is ona li pana e sona. Now, that's another one we definitely already understand. That's something like, they give knowledge. But tawa here actually tells us who they are giving that knowledge to. In this case, we're talking about tawa yan ante, that is, two different people. This is still a kind of motion. We're providing a way for this given knowledge to go. So that's the first aspect of tawa, that is, movement. Tawa can also describe perspective, as in the English word to. So you could say it's description from the point of view of something or someone. Here's an example sentence. Ni li pona mute tawa mi. Ni li pona mute tawa mi. The prepositional phrase begins here with tawa, and then we say this is tawa mi. So the core of the sentence is about this being very good. It's fantastic. Tawa mi gives us perspective on that. It says, well, this is very good to me, in my perspective or in my opinion. Here's a similar case. Kasi ni li suli tawa yan. Kasi ni li suli tawa yan. We have our prepositional phrase here. And in this case, we're saying kasi ni li suli as the core of the sentence. Something like, this plant is big. But now we're providing more context for how that plant is big. And how big is it? Well, it's definitely large in comparison to people, or more literally, large to people. Kasi ni li suli tawa yan. These are both different versions of perspective. We can say something is in the opinion of an individual or a group of people. We can say something is relative to a specific object or a group of people or a person. And then the last aspect of tawa has to do with purpose. Yan li pali e ni tawa sona. Yan li pali e ni tawa sona. Let's underline our prepositional phrase right there. Yan li pali e ni is something like, the person created this. Tawa sona is giving a purpose in doing that. What was the reason behind it? But importantly, that's not necessarily the cause. This doesn't have to do with tan. Yan li pali e ni tawa sona is something like, the person did this in order to understand, or for understanding, for knowledge. Let's do another one. Mi ni tawa ona. Mi ni tawa ona. Now, mi ni, as the core of the sentence, is something like, I do this, right? I perform this action. Tawa ona, underlining here, is something like, for them, or for their sake. So in this case, we're saying, I did this for them, right? And actually, that is the case that tawa behaves a lot like the English word for in this usage. So you can tell apart all these three different uses of tawa by context. So, for example, if the speaker is explaining why they did something, that would be about purpose. Or if the speaker were giving their opinion, that would be about perspective. You would get used to these different ideas as you practice more. Now let's talk about lon. Lon can talk about location, where or when something is. So let's look at that. We have kulupu, li, lon, kiwen, walo, yelo. Kulupu, li, lon, kiwen, walo, yelo. So first, our prepositional phrase begins with lon. Kulupu, li, lon, kiwen, walo, yelo is something like the group is on the yellow and white rocks. So this is about location. Lon is talking about where something takes place or where something is. In a physical sense, you could use this to talk about being in a home or in a specific country. Lon can also be about time. We could say, suno li lon tenpo suli. Suno li lon tenpo suli. Our prepositional phrase again begins with lon. And this is now something like, the light has been around for a long time, or the sun has existed for a long time. This is a claim about where this suno is in time, but it's still a kind of location. And lastly, lon can be about ideas. You could talk about, for example, the subject of a conversation. We could say, mi, toki, lon, sona, alasa, mi. Mi, toki, lon, sona, alasa, mi. Prepositional phrase right here. So the core of the sentence is mi, toki. I am talking or speaking. Lon tells us what the context of that speaking is. In this case, sona, alasa, mi. That is my hunting knowledge or my searching knowledge, my understanding of how to find something. These are the three different aspects of lon when it refers to location. Lon is, of course, talking about location in a physical sense here, in a time sense here, and in a idea sense here. But they're all different kinds of location. Next we have tan. Mi, wawa, tan, moku, pona. Mi, wawa, tan, moku, pona. Highlight right there, the prepositional phrase. Mi, wawa, tan, moku, pona. We have the start of the sentence, mi, wawa. I am powerful, strong, or confident. Tan gives us a reason for that. I am strong because of good food. So that's the main use of tan, but it actually does have one more use. You'll observe that this is like a cause, a reason for something to happen, but tan can talk about origin as well, and be a little bit similar to motion. We could say, mi, tan, kulupu, musi. Highlight right here. Mi, tan, kulupu, musi. Which would be something like, I am from the comedy troupe. And that will be about origin. But it could also be that you've just arrived somewhere and you're explaining where you arrived from. So there's a little bit of motion in that idea as well. Now, quick note. Tawa talks about purpose, while tan talks about cause. If you want to tell them apart, you should ask yourself, is one of these things making the other happen? If so, that is tan. And if not, that's tawa. Next, let's talk about sama. Sama has to do with the similarity of things. So let's say we have pali, sona, sina, li, sama, mama, mi. Pali, sona, sina, li, sama, mama, mi. In this case, sama is talking about the subject, and you can tell that because sama happens directly in the predicate, not after some other action. Pali, sona, sina, li, sama, mama, mi is something like, your teaching work is similar to my mom. Now, of course, this last statement is a little bit non-literal. It leaves out a piece of information where it talks about the work of my mom. But you don't need that detail because it's a little bit similar to saying, you do the same work as my mom, or you do the same work as my dad. Next, we have ona, li, ken, tawa, wawa, sama, yan, wawa. Ona, li, ken, tawa, wawa, sama, yan, wawa. Our preposition begins with sama right here. And so the core of the sentence, ona, li, ken, tawa, wawa. They can move powerfully, strongly, quickly. Sama, yan, wawa. In a similar way to somebody who is strong or powerful. So this could be, for example, they can run fast like a sprinter, or they can move powerfully like a weightlifter. So remember, sama covers all kinds of sameness. It doesn't have to be that this person can literally run like an Olympic sprinter, but if they can move pretty quickly, enough to surprise you, that's sama, all right. One more preposition, and that is kepeken. Yan, li, seli, e, moku, kepeken, ilo, seli. Yan, li, seli, e, moku, kepeken, ilo, seli. Kepeken is our preposition and goes on to the end. Yan, li, seli, e, moku is something like the person heats up the food. They make it warm, or maybe they cook it. And then kepeken tells us what tools they're using to do it. In this case, e, ilo, seli, a heating tool. Now, the thing in kepeken doesn't have to be an ilo. You could, for example, use a rock. We could say, mi, pakala, e, kiwen, kepeken, kiwen. Mi, pakala, e, kiwen, kepeken, kiwen. Underline that. So, kiwen, of course, is not explicitly a tool, but certainly you can use it like a tool. Otherwise, that's it. Kepeken just talks about using something. So now that we've talked about all the different kinds of prepositions, let's talk about a couple of important notes about using them. For starters, you can actually have more than one prepositional phrase in a sentence. When one prepositional phrase ends, you can just start another. Here's an example. Ona, li, toki, lon, lape, ona, sama, mama, pi, yan, mi. Ona, li, toki, lon, lape, ona, sama, mama, pi, yan, mi. So we recognize that there are definitely two separate prepositional phrases here. The first one begins with lon and continues to ona. And the second one begins with sama and continues to the end of the sentence. And these two, of course, interrelate with one another, providing more context for the statement. Ona li toki, the core of the sentence, is something like, they are speaking. Lon tells us the subject of that conversation, and sama tells us how that is similar to something else. So, lon, lape, ona. They're talking about the way they're sleeping. Sama, mama, pi, yan, mi. Mama, the parent or guardian. Pi, yan, mi. This is an entire modifier for mama. Yan, mi is something like my friend or my sibling or my partner, somebody who's closely related to you, but not necessarily in a family way, right? Mama, pi, yan, mi, okay, the parent of my partner. So altogether we have, they are talking about their sleep in the same way my partner's mom does, or my partner's grandfather does, something like that. So in that case, we had two separate ideas affecting the core of the sentence. We can do that essentially any number of times. Otherwise, the rules are the same as with a single preposition. So let's try another one of those. Pilin, mi, li, kama, pona, tan, lape, tan, tawa, telo. Pilin mi, li, kama, pona, tan, lape, tan, tawa, telo. First, our prepositional phrases, tan, lape, and then tan, tawa, telo. So the core of the sentence is pilin mi, li, kama, pona. That is, my feelings, my emotions have become better. And then tan is giving us a reason for that, right? Pilin mi li kamapona tan lape. Understandable, my feelings become better from sleeping. And then separately, tan tawa telo, which is something like because of swimming, a water-related kind of motion. So having multiple prepositional phrases that use the same preposition is a bit like saying and in English. In this case, we would say altogether that this sentence means my feelings have become better from sleeping and from swimming. One more important subject before the exercises. So, remember the word ala? Ala can actually be used on prepositions as well. So let's look at a few examples. We could say, Yan pali li kepiken ala lipu ni. Yan pali li kepiken ala lipu ni. So if you put ala directly after the preposition, it says that thing is not happening. We can underline our preposition here. Kepiken here is modified by ala. We can draw a little arrow to indicate that. And then the prepositional phrase is lipu ni, right? So yan pali li kepiken ala lipu ni. Well, yan pali, a kind of worker, right? Li kepiken ala is not using. Lipu ni, this book or this document, right? Let's look at another one. We could say, mi pilin nasa sama ala sina. Sama ala sina. Mi pilin nasa is the core of the sentence, and it says, I'm feeling weird or I'm feeling strange, right? Sama ala sina. So in a way that is not similar to you. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. You can expect ala to behave in this relatively simple way for all of the prepositions. All right, let's go on to the exercises. So let's say we have the sentence, Sina tan kulupu pi yan pana. Sina tan kulupu pi yan pana. Well, let's look at a context. Let's say you're walking through a convention center when somebody runs up and says, hi. They know you from your outreach work and they're super excited to meet you. They open up with, Sina tan kulupu pi yan pana. You're from the philanthropy community. All right, that makes good sense. Sina tan kulupu pi yan pana. You are from the philanthropy community. Sure. Next one. Ilo li pali e supa kepiken ilo ante. Ilo li pali e supa kepiken ilo ante. So let's say you're on a tour of a factory, watching how various household objects get made. As you walk, you observe marvelous machinery working super hard, and then you come across one machine in particular wielding another machine. And then you remark, Ilo li pali e supa kepiken ilo ante. The machine is creating furniture using another machine. That's a fun one, right? Let's go on to another. Mi pali lon tempo mute. Mi wile tawa ma ante. Mi pali lon tempo mute. Mi wile tawa ma ante. Two separate sentences here. Let's say, every time you try to take a vacation, something comes up and you have to cancel. It's like the whole universe is conspiring against you. You've been planning a trip to the Netherlands for months, but your boss says you can't take the time off. You're starting to think they're doing it on purpose, and you think to yourself, mi pali lon tempo mute, mi wile tawa ma ante. So the first half, mi pali lon tempo mute, is something like, I work many, many times. And then, mi wile tawa ma ante. I want to go someplace else, a different place. Let's do another one. Ma li supa, sama supa moku. So let's say your friend has been reading a weird new blog and feeding you hints as to what the topic of the blog is as they're reading. You're not really sure what it's about, and your friend won't tell you no matter how much you ask, until one day, barely stifling a chuckle, they tell you, "Ma li supa, sama supamoku." The earth is flat, the same as a dinner plate. Obviously not true, but funny. Let's go on to another one. Ma li suli ala tawa sewi, ona li suli tawa yan. Ma li suli ala tawa sewi, ona li suli tawa yan. So, let's say you're sitting in class, learning about geography and space as well. Your teacher is emphasizing the relative size of the Earth in comparison to other objects. And that's an important idea to understand because it helps you put into perspective how large the Earth is, right? And it helps you to understand that the Earth is much larger than any one person. Your teacher says, "Ma li suli ala tawa sewi, ona li suli tawa yan." And the first half here is, the Earth is not large in comparison to the sky. It is large to people. Two statements that relate to one another to give you more information than just one alone about the size of ma. All right, let's do another one. Mi, pana, e, ni, tawa, sina, tan, wile, mi. Mi, pana, e ni, tawa, sina, tan, wile, mi. Let's say a close friend is going on a long trip, and they don't know when they'll be back. They gave you something important to them, a bracelet they'd had for years. You try to refuse it, saying it's too important to them to give away, right? But your friend insists, saying, "Mi pana e ni tawa sina tan wile mi." That is, I give this to you from my own wants, because I want it. Let's do another. Mi ken lon ma ale lon tempo ale. Mi ken lon ma ale lon tempo ale. So, after quitting your job, you find yourself with brand new freedom. You cut down on your expenses, you sell off some things, and you start traveling with the saved money. When you get to your first destination, you realize something even better with incredible excitement, and you say, "Mi ken lon ma ale lon tempo ale." I can be any place at any time. Incredible. Couple more here. Let's say we have the sentence, "Kasi li lon ala ma sewi." Kasi li lon ala ma sewi. So let's say, again, you're sitting in class, learning about how plants have adapted to a variety of different environments. However, there are some environments that plants haven't adapted to, such as the cold and thin air on tall mountains. And the teacher says, "Kasi li lon ala ma sewi." Plants are not found, are not in very high up places. One more. Nasin mi li tan ala ma mi. Nasin mi li tan ala ma mi. So, you're having a discussion with some friends about where you grew up and how that influenced the way you think. For many of your friends, their life philosophies came from where they grew up, but you feel differently. You had a very different upbringing, and you say, "Nasin mi li tan ala ma mi." My philosophy is not from where I grew up. So let's do a quick summary. So, for starters, as we learned at the start of the lesson, prepositions extend Toki Pona's grammar a bit. You can include a new phrase in your sentences, which of course occurs after the predicate, after the object, or directly inside the predicate, depending on exactly what it's talking about. So this new bit of Toki Pona's grammar lets us give better explanations about what's going on around us and in the world. Now, something you may have noticed during this lesson is that the word tawa especially is used often as a normal content word and as a preposition. It also gets modified pretty often, so modified tawa, like for example, tawa telo from one of the exercises, that looks pretty similar to a preposition. This could be traveling to the water, or in the perspective of water. You can't always tell apart tawa as a content word from tawa as a preposition, but you can get pretty good at it. For example, prepositions generally appear last in the statement they're referring to. So if your tawa is after an object or after a predicate and very clearly contains especially more words than just one, it's probably a preposition. Now, it's worth mentioning that this applies to every preposition except for kepiken, since they can be used as normal content words and are very often. But it affects tawa the most just because tawa, the idea of moving around, is a really common thing to talk about. If you're ever unsure, ask somebody for help with reading, or you can ask for a restatement when speaking. And one last little note. These video lessons are a good bit shorter and less detailed than my written lessons. If you want to check these out, you can go to my website in the description, where there's a bunch more content to see. A lot of these exercises are pulled from those lessons, but there's going to be a bunch more, and you can review those at any time. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you learned something cool.